Cognitive science studies on the category of term in daily communication of Vietnamese people. The case of conceptual metaphor, term is a container, by Dr. Phạm Thị Hương Quỳnh.
Introduction. Cognitive linguistics believe that every nation and every culture has a unique thought framework that affects the way people think, speak, and communicate. This article focuses on the metaphorical analysis of the notion that time is a container. This is how people perceive time in Vietnamese language. Time is an idea that always exists in the mind of man because we experience time through the transformation of ourselves and of everything around us. Therefore, this is a very common conceptual metaphor in Vietnamese thinking. Survey material of the article is the conversations in daily life. It truly reflects Vietnamese people's feeling and ways of thinking about the world around them. Materials and methods. Overview of conceptual metaphor. Conceptual metaphor considers conceptuality as the basic unit of the spirit. The main concept is a result of the process of creating mental symbols, an element made up of three aspects: intelligence, emotion, and will. Currently, scientists put concepts in two relationships to study. One is conceptual in the relationship between language and culture. The second is a notion in the relationship between language and perception. In any relationship, the idea is always systematic. It means there will be a concept as a basis to develop all the remaining concepts into an interconnected system. Conceptual metaphor has the structure A is B, where A is the target concept and B is the source idea. Source domain irradiation to target reason sheds light to the target domain. For example, love is the journey, with love is target domain and journey as the source domain. The source of the journey will irradiate its characteristics such as destination, transportation, participants in the journey, etc. For example, you go your way, I go my way, parting, in which the idea of the part belongs to the journey. The conceptual metaphor is thus universal, just as Lakoff once said, "We live by metaphor." Time is an abstract concept, but is a unit that can be measured through changes in phenomena. For example, from a biological perspective, human birth, growth, maturity, and aging can be identified through physical transformation. People always live in the three-dimensional space of the past, present, and future. The circle of time always continues between the three spatial regions. Today is the present, and today will become the past of tomorrow. Tomorrow is the embodiment of the future. Therefore, people and things of the objective world are always in the movement of three dimensions of time. Looking at the diagram above, we see that people are aware of time through daily life, through years, and through their own changes. Structure of content concept. The source domain of container is usually the source domain of ontological metaphors. If the structure metaphor has a specific source domain and a more abstract target domain, then in the metaphor ontology, both domains are abstract concepts. Therefore, the source domain in the structure metaphor often carries its specific characteristics to clarify the meaning of the target domain. Look at the diagram. We see that there are two directions of the arrow. One direction from the container concept to the other ideas of the one direction from the arrow towards the central idea. This is explained as the arrows pointing to container as secondary concepts, showing each feature of the main idea and it belongs to that main idea. The direction of the arrow from the center towards the outside means that the container concept is the basic concept of the other ideas. This is a manifestation of the network and the connection of ideas in the human spiritual world. Expressions of metaphor term is a container in language. Irradiation scheme of conceptual metaphor of term is a container. The irradiation scheme of the conceptual metaphor of term as container is meant to illustrate the reference from the source domain to the destination domain. Based on the properties of the container source domain, we formulate a mapping scheme as follows. The linguistic expressions of the conceptual metaphor of term is a container. The characteristics of the container source domain irradiates the target term domain to concretize this abstract concept. First of all, term is coded as a container containing everything. Consider the following examples. What kind of school did Mang study there in the past? He studied finance and banking in Taiwan. In the above language expression, in the past, it is a unit of the past time and the event. My aunt studied banking and finance in Taiwan. Belongs to that past time. Thus, in the past, it is understood as a container for my school's event. Hey, you work here in the second half of September? Yes, I worked from in September until now. No, but before I only worked from 2008 until now, until September now. I have come out in Vinh. I have been working in Vinh always. Similarly, around the half of September until now is also a container for the working event. Before, that is also a concept of time belonging to the past. In this conversation, there is also the movement of time from the past to the present. It is the recollection in a closed circle of three spatial regions. Within that periods of time, events are objects. Discussion. This study has shown that Vietnamese people think about time at different ages. The reason for the difference is that due to age, old people often have more experiences in life than young people. Conversely, young people have more ambitions and dreams than old people. That's why old people tend to think about the past time, don't attach too much importance to money, and young people often think about money, love, etc. Conclusion. By analyzing the typical linguistic expressions in the conceptual metaphor of time is a container, we find that the sense of time of Vietnamese people is mostly concentrated in the basic attribute of time as a container of things, and time are felt more in the past, the present more. In particular, for the elderly, the sense of the past is very clear. The past is a place where memories, events has passed in life. For young people, the sense of time is often more present. That is also consistent with the psychological characteristics of Vietnamese people, because Vietnamese people often tend to review the old situations of or take stories of families, children from private life to tell each other. Individual ego is mingled in ourselves. That is the exact opposite of the West people, because Westerners value the self, the privacy. Acknowledgements. Cognitive linguistics is not a mere theory of language, but a research direction that synthesizes many scientific disciplines such as computer science, neuroscience, linguistics, and so on. Cognitive learning aims to answer the questions of how is the thought process formed, what psychological processes are involved in the formation of ideas in the human mind. Conceptual metaphor is a human way of thinking that helps us perceive the world through our own experiences. The conceptual metaphor of time is an example of how we think metaphorically.